Hi, people on Zoom. Can you hear us now?
Yes.
I apologize. I was muted our own selves. My soul was mute. To you, it's a relative thing, depending which realm you're in. So we were just making introductions, and everybody went around the room and said what their soul is like today. Would any of you like to add just a word? Hi, my name is so and so, and my soul is fill in the blank. Anyone on Zoom? Okay, people on Zoom. You can also write it in the chat. But at least now you can hear us, so that's better. Okay, so what we're going to do, and I will not be able to share this document due to a technical difficulty with the ones on Zoom, but I will be able to share it with you later via email. I do want to share with you kind of like a little, very short essay that I've compiled together, putting together 3,000 years of, maybe you can pass it, 3,000 years of Jewish history about the soul. This class is going to be very different than the next ones because I want to kind of be organized and systematic, and then we can go into very weird and hopefully inspiring Kabbalistic texts. So, see, when we did that round about the soul, there were certain assumptions. There were certain assumptions made, right? For example, what assumptions were made? If we do a round and everybody says, "Hi, my name is so and so, and my soul is such and such," what is the assumption that is underlying this little exercise that we did? Yeah, that we have soul. Yes. Yeah, I'm not sure we have enough copies. Mm-hmm. I can also share with you. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can also, a couple of good souls. Right? I can also share with you this little textbook here that I comprised that goes alongside with it. And also a little timeline. I'll pass the timeline from the other side. It's really a lot of background information. So what are the assumptions that are being made? That we have a soul. Yes, that's mainly so. What else? What other assumptions are being made? Yeah. That we can know our souls. Right? That if I say I have a soul, I'm assuming that I have a soul. That I can know it, and what else I can do? Yeah. That it can be changed, that it can be even described with words. Right? All these, so what does it mean? And if we really went around and everybody asked everyone, what is that soul that you're describing? Right? We'll be getting very different answers. And that is very true for the Jewish tradition, not just about souls, but about a lot of things. Okay? Is that usually if you ask, what is Judaism's belief about anything at all? What's usually the rule about that? That you will not get one answer, right? There are other faith traditions that are a little bit more organized in their dogma, for better and for worse. For better and for worse. For better because sometimes it's very helpful if someone can just listen. God is such and such. If you want to go to heaven, if there is a heaven, I'm not sure, right? You have to do this and that. If you want to not go to hell, right? You should refrain from doing this and that. Okay? So Judaism isn't like that. And even though there's parts of Judaism that pretend that it's like that, it's really not like that. If you go even in the more rigid forms of Judaism, right? And especially in Reform Judaism, even more so, I will say that we're very kind of fluid. We have our scripture, we have our values, we have a few ideas about what's right and wrong. Sometimes we're right or wrong about them. But in many cases, and the soul searching included, different Jews have said different things about the soul and even named it different names throughout the generations. Right? And in this 6-week session, I really want to focus on Kabbalah. And even that is really, there's lots of Kabbalah. There's 13th century Kabbalah, there's 16th century Kabbalah, there's Hasidism, there's Neo-Hasidism, there's modern interpretations, okay? It's really more than we can cover in 6 weeks. But where does Kabbalah come from, and where is the broader conversation? So this little presentation here, okay, is aimed to give us some kind of a background. So where do we begin? Usually when we begin talking about Judaism, where do we start? And when do we start? Where? What's the first book, the first source? Well, Genesis is it's a little narrow. I mean, if we're talking about the Torah, the Bible. Yes, the Torah begins with Genesis, you're right, but there are many books that came after, right? So the 3,000 years, 4,000 years of Jewish history, we begin with the Bible. Now, in the Bible, in biblical times, you will not, maybe I'll read it. You can follow me. It's not usually how I teach. People who know how I teach know that it's not usually how I teach. Usually I speak freely because I have an attempt to go against my actual nature, which is not to be organized when I teach. I want to be organized for the first class, so then we can be unorganized later on. And I'm assuming that this will probably only last, like this experiment will be organized for 5 minutes. And then I'll transgress against my attempt. But let's try, okay? So it says here, the Jewish understanding of the soul is not a fixed doctrine, but a long, rich conversation stretching across 3 millennia. Each era asks a similar question: what is the human being before God? But answers it in different idiom. The soul travels through the Bible, the rabbis, medieval philosophy, Kabbalah, Hasidic, modern Jewish thought, and contemporary feminist and queer theology. Together, these creative tapestry of, what does it say? I can't read my own writing. I didn't bring my glasses. Someone's going to have to read instead of me. All right, who wants to read the next paragraph out loud about the Hebrew Bible? Anyone willing? All right. I think you're going to have to do it through the mic, with a mic. Next time I'll bring my glasses. I'll get better at this, I promise. The what?
Is it too loud for anyone else? No.
It's a little loud. It's a little loud? Please say 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3.
Okay, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3.
Is that better?
1, 2, 3.
Go ahead. Okay, read the first paragraph.
In the Hebrew Bible, the soul is not an immaterial entity floating above the body. The foundational word nefesh means life, self, or person. The human being becomes a living nefesh. A person does not receive one as an added part. Ruach is the divine breath or wind that animates and empowers. Neshama is the breath God infuses into the human being at creation. Biblical anthropology sees the person as a unified living being, embodied, earthy, and relational. The afterlife is limited. Sheol is a dim underworld, neither reward nor punishment. Only late biblical passages, like Daniel 12, gesture toward resurrection and moral judgment, hinting at questions that future generations would expand dramatically.
He reads very well. Thank you. No, before we continue reading, so what do we learn from this passage about the soul in the Bible? Is there an organized doctrine of the soul in the Bible? There is not. If you turn to the other pages that I brought to you, you'll see that there are different quotations from the Bible. And what we can learn from them is that we can't learn something systematic from the Bible. Right? Different biblical sources. The Bible has also not been written by one person. The Bible has been written over a course of 1,500 years, more or less, maybe 1,000 years, maybe more, and by lots of people who had lots of different ideas. Also culturally not feel the need to organize their thought about the soul, because even this idea that there should be an organized science about what is the soul, or what is anything for that matter, was not an original Jewish concept. It came from other cultures. Which culture do you know? Greek. It's not, and you'll see that, it's not until the Jewish history, Jewish culture assimilated with the Hellenistic world later on, the Jews started to think, oh, maybe we should have a systemized idea about the soul. Because originally the Jews weren't thinking like that. Similarly, like if you go to some indigenous Native American people, right, and you ask them, what is your systemized idea about this and that? They may not be, because in their culture they were thinking differently about those kind of things, right? So if you just take a glance, some quotations from the Hebrew Bible, it's on this page, and there are many more. This is just a few ideas. All right, so in Genesis, you mentioned Genesis, Susan. Then the Lord God formed the human from the dust and the ground, breathed into its nostrils the breath of life, and the human became a living being. All right, is that a systemized idea of the soul? It's not. It's an image. It's a story, right? In Job, the Spirit of God has made me, and the breath of the Almighty gives me life. What gives me life? What gives me life? Of whom? Did you know that God breathes? Let's make a little experiment. Can you now breathe for a moment? Well, you're all breathing, right? Can anyone not breathe for a moment? You can for a moment, but not much longer, right? So inhale, exhale. Who's breathing? Oh, we are, right? Whose breath is this anyways? Who breathes? Right? So there's an idea in Judaism that God is the one that's putting breath into our, and if you think about breath as this exchange, right, between us and the rest of the world, it becomes interesting. Right? Breath is a key. We're going to get to breath later on. Breath is a key. What is the Hebrew word for breath? No. Neshima. Neshima. What is the ruach means wind or spirit. So it's true. Ruach is air, and it's also spirit. So in modern Hebrew, ruchaniut is spirituality. Ruchaniut comes from ruach, wind or spirit. When we breathe ruach, air into us, it has to do with ruach. Neshama, you said neshama before. Neshama means soul. They all mean soul. We're going to get to that later on. Neshama means soul. Neshima means breath. Very closely related. Why is the idea of soul? You see, I'm not keeping to my pages. What is the idea of soul and the idea of breath closely related? When we are born into this world, what happens the first moment after we're born? We start breathing. What happens when we die? What is believed to be the soul enters the body, let's say, allegedly, maybe, when we are born. When does it leave the body? When we die. So breath and soul are very closely related. So in many of those depictions, you will see the connection from the Bible. But again, it's not a system. It's just a bunch of verses that starts a conversation. But we understand already that the connection between the soul, the human, and God is something that we need to think about. Whose soul is it anyways? That question we'll be asking ourselves throughout the semester. Whose soul is this anyways? Yeah.
Well, if God is breathing life into us, is God breathing our soul to us?
Maybe. If you read in the Bible, you'll get different, maybe, yeah, possibly, right? Judges, but the Spirit of the Lord took possession of Gideon. Gideon was a warrior. He was a leader. When he went to war, it wasn't his spirit leading him, it was the Spirit of God. Is that the soul? Is that inspiration? Is that might? Is it like energetic power? What is that spirit? Again, something a little different, not a system. Ecclesiastes, famous one. We say it in funerals sometimes. The dust returns to the earth as it was, and the spirit returns to God who gave it. Is that an afterlife? Is there an afterlife here?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. Right? It just kind of talks about our existence as something that is comprised of two elements. Something earthly that goes back to the earth, and a spirit that goes back to where? To the trees, to the wind, to God. Is that a heaven? Nobody knows. Doesn't elaborate. In general, in the Bible, there is hardly any talk of the afterlife. Even this Ecclesiastes here is a very late and different book than most of the Bible. At least acknowledges that there's a spirit in the body. In most of the Bible, if our ancestors die, what happens? Do you know what it says? They gathered to their people. They gathered to their ancestor. That's it. End of story. Because they had caves and they would just collect the bones of the ancestors together. That's all it means. Or sometimes there's a mention of Sheol, like you read, Sheol, which is a place of like where the souls go to and they're not dynamic. They're not moving. And that's it. If they even mention it at all. Only in very later parts of the Bible, like Daniel, there is a mention of the resurrection or something like that. Okay, but all this thing, heaven, hell, all those things don't exist in the Bible at all. And often people don't know that. Maybe they exist in the Christian Bible, but I'm not an expert. In the Hebrew Bible, these things don't hardly exist. Okay? Let's turn the page here. Right, so you see, Psalm says, "You have put me in the lowest pit, Sheol, in the darkest depths." But it could mean also a psychological state of mind, not necessarily a place that you go to after death. In the book of Daniel, many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake. This is the only place in the Bible that the resurrection is mentioned. And again, it's a very late stage of the Bible. Where did Daniel get that? Okay? Not existing in other places of the Bible and not represented, but it's still there. And only at a very later stage. Any questions so far? Pretty soft. Yeah.
I was surprised by the soul is not an immaterial entity. Because it just seems like almost a common concept of the soul is it's not a body.
Yeah. You see, but that kind of exactly is my point, that exactly that kind of thinking is not, even the thought that there's a body and they're separate, that's kind of like a Hellenistic concept. And it becomes something that Jews are very, very busy about, like 2 paragraphs later in our essay. But in biblical times, if you read the biblical time, you see that they live their life happily. Not bothered by, hey, what is the soul and what is it made of? And if the body is so-and-so, how come, and what happens to the soul after death? And all these thoughts that we think about because we have 2,000 years of Western history implanted in us. Did not, if you see in the Bible, it's just a non-issue. Oh yeah, God created the people and breathed into life into them and they lived happily ever after and then they died. And no one asked any questions and everyone was happy. And God's punishment or reward, or if any, are in this world, not in the world to come. There is no world to come. You live, you die, that's it. The soul goes somewhere, we don't know where, we don't care. Not interesting. So this entire idea, and it's kind of, it's kind of reading the Bible like that is kind of, you have to do a lot of unlearning to 2,000 years of Western history that have shaped how we read the Bible. And some Christian concepts that were later, because they're already were influenced by the Greeks, and a lot of Jewish concepts that came later on and kind of like messed with how we read the original Bible. But if it's it's not in the, see, so that's, your question is wonderful, because just like you said, this is something that I'm used to think like that. Oh, the soul has a different existence than the body. It's a very Greek way of thinking. And Yasu, Kalispera, Kalimera, that's Greek. It's the only Greek words I know. So it's and it's who we are. It's also how I am, because I am also a product of, Western society, blah, blah, blah. But it's interesting to see that in the Jewish original kind of like indigenous levels of our culture, the biblical ones, people weren't bothered by the same questions as we are, so they didn't attempt to give answers to questions that didn't bother them, that bother us. Yeah? Yeah.
The fact that the soul is returning, dust is returning, means that, to me, that it's been there before.
Mm-hmm.
So it's sort of, this soul seems to get recycled. Various people, maybe.
Maybe. So, right. So has it been there before? We come right that, yes. So the idea is that the body comes from also, that's in Genesis, right? That at least one of the versions of Genesis, because there's 2 chapters, A and B, and there's different creation stories in Genesis. But the idea that the body came from the soil, from the earth, and it returns there. And the spirit goes back to God, which gave it. But it does not elaborate. Is it reincarnation? Is it like a big bank of souls that we go back to? Later texts try to give answers to those things, but the Bible remains very short about those, if at all. That's as most as you get in the Bible about these questions, right? So and maybe by the way, that could be very comforting for some of us, and that's how. The fact that the Bible is a very rich spiritual book, and that their ancestors lived their lives for thousands of years not worried about those questions, could be actually a great lesson for us. Maybe we don't need this 6 weeks about the soul. See what I mean? Maybe it's kind of like, oh, okay, just live your life and be a good person, and don't worry about the afterlife or what is the soul. Just don't worry, be happy. It's a little bit Zen-like, So, and you'll see that later, if we'll ever get to it, that later generations kind of like did that. They kind of try to do the unlearning and go back to that, but they're all more sophisticated because history has happened so far. Yeah.
And Ecclesiastes, for the fate of humans and animals is the same. Whether the human spirit goes upward and the animal spirit goes downward. I think that makes me sad. So I'd like to think that.
Well, Ecclesiastes would do that to you.
Animals are pure. So.
Ecclesiastes is a book that could make people sad because it looks at life in a very skeptical way, and it's kind of like, what's the meaning of life? Everything is vanity. All is vanity. That's a recurring, right? But then, in fact, if you read it deeper, you see that there is, but. The answers are kind of asking you to tease you. What's the difference between you and an animal? Is there, like I have, some of you know that I have a deep relationship with a bunny that I never thought that I would, because my daughter got a bunny for her birthday, and now it's our bunny, right? And I never had any relationship with bunnies, and now I wake up in the morning, I go to make coffee, she hears the coffee machine, she knows to run to the fridge. She does this until she gets her carrot. There's an entire, my soul, whether or not it exists, I don't know, I'm not sure, has a very deep relationship with a bunny. And often I do yoga, she comes to do yoga near me, it's like a whole thing, the bunny. And then I kind of, so what's the difference between me and the bunny? Really? She's obsessed with using her mouth to eat all the time. To chest and chew. I'm obsessed with talking. It's the same muscle, same idea, right? It's just like, really, what's the difference, right? Seriously, what's the difference in essence between my soul and the bunny soul? Is there or is it just like another version of the same thing? But okay, so I'm not saying yes or no. I'm saying that Ecclesiastes will ask you very deep questions, and then there might be an answer, but it makes us think. Let's move on to, you want to read the next paragraph? Or do you want to pass it around?
The rules begin. Yeah, until you get tired. You do it so well. Go ahead.
In rabbinic literature, the soul becomes morally charged. The rabbis called the soul pure, given by God each morning as a trust rather than a possession. They introduced the inner drama of Yetzer Tov and Yetzer Ra, modeling moral complexity rather than physical dualism. Olam Haba, Yehinom, and bodily resurrection emerge as central doctrines. Some midrashim imagine a pre-existing guf, a heavenly storehouse of souls awaiting embodiment. The rabbinic soul is not described in systemic philosophical terms. Instead, it is the narrative self situated in covenant, law, and ethical responsibility.
Great. Right. So rabbinic literature is somewhere between the biblical and the later stages where we're already heavily influenced by Greek philosophy. Okay. Like you read in the rabbinic strata of Judaism, which heavily influence how we think about Judaism until today. Yeah. The difference between that and the biblical time, that there is already an understanding that the soul is something separate from the body. There's already a talk of an afterlife, of reward, of all those things that you've read. Nonetheless, or however, it's not a systematic discourse. They have different, they're still very Jewish in that sense. They'll have different stories and different quotations and different ideas. But the rabbis were many, and they also, their period of time lasted over almost 1,000 years as well. And some of them were in the land of Israel, and some of them were in Babylonia. And lots of things happened. And yes, they're already influenced by the Greeks that co-lived in their proximity, or occupied them even. The Romans occupied them, right? They were influenced by that culture. But it's still not a systemic attempt to say the soul is so and so, this and that. Okay? So if we turn to some in the other page, to some of the sources, I don't think I brought you many here, but just to taste. So it must attract the brachot. My God, the soul you have given me is pure. Anyone recognize this? Where do we sing it? Saturday morning. Well, because you only come to shul on Saturday morning. But if you're Orthodox and you prayed every day, like when I was a kid, yeah, or even if you just prayed every day without coming to synagogue, or if you want to, we say Elohai neshama shenatata bi tehorai. This is the source. It's from Tractate Brachot, but it's in our prayer book. Elohai neshama shenatata bi tehorai. And that whole paragraph, this is just the first sentence. You find it in Tractate Brachot, you find it in our prayer books. It's part of the morning prayer where we acknowledge that we have a soul. That's not a biblical source. It's a Talmudic source, and it says we have a soul that God created, and that soul is pure. You will never find such a thing in the Bible. It's a rabbinic construct. It's a rabbinic idea that there is a soul created by God, and that is pure. What does it mean that the soul is pure, by the way? What is pure? Good. Not tainted. Holy.
There's nothing but soul.
What's that?
There's nothing but soul.
There's nothing but, I mean nothing in the world. It's only a soul.
No, it's pure. That means soul.
Mm-hmm. Not tainted by anything else. So if I'm a terrible person and I did terrible things, what happens to my soul? Still pure? Maybe. What's that?
You have potential.
I do. Maybe.
No, but every day you have the opportunity
Mhm.
Sorry, go ahead.
How do you know all those things? Where? See?
But in the morning, that reads, life that's my back, like, you just read it.
The soul that is in me is pure. So, but it's, you see, so we know a lot of things. We think that we know a lot of things. Every day we can be renewed. Does anyone, yes? Yeah?
It says, and then, that, the rabbis call the soul pure, given by God each morning as a trust rather than a possession. So is it possible not to be given
The soul?
in the morning?
Depends who you ask.
It's not that.
Well, you could also wake up. There is a verse in the Bible that some people were the enemies of Israel and they woke up in the morning and realized that they were dead. It's kind of like a biblical joke. How can you wake up in the morning and right? So well, is it are all, let's just raise questions here, right? Are all souls pure? Can a soul be tainted, or can that purity be taken away by something? Or is there something in you that remains pure no matter what? Are all souls equal, or are some, like, are the souls of Jews or non-Jews equal, or are the souls of animals and people, humans equal? Are the souls of everybody, no matter of their deeds and like you see, there's many questions. Can a soul be renewed? Can someone not have a soul? Can someone sell their soul to the devil? Is there a devil? How do we know the things that we know about a soul? How do we know those things? Where do we know them from? Right? There's many layers to our culture. There's also many other cultures that we're influenced by, not necessarily a bad thing. Jews have been living side by side with other people for even in biblical times, since the beginning. The Jews were never alone, ever, till today. All right, so all those things, I'm just using this kind of like introduction to kind of like raise a lot of questions. Yes.
How do we differentiate between soul and personality, though?
Great question. If you read it in the Bible will not answer that. What is a personality? Very modern concept that we have personalities. Well, the Bible acknowledges that we have emotions and thoughts. Great question. Is that our soul? What is the soul? Is it my feeling? Someone hurt my feelings. Did they hurt my soul or did they hurt my feeling? They're two different things. Are they? Okay. An idea that came to my head. Is it my soul? Can a soul be Jewish? I'm just asking questions. Do I have a Jewish soul or do I have a human soul?
People say that, oh, he's got a Jewish soul.
What? Yeah, you've got such a Jewish soul. Is that a cute thing to say, or is that a racist thing to say?
No,
It's a nice thing to hear. What if you're not Jewish and you're like, hey, but I also want a Jewish soul. Like,
I don't think
it's what?
I think it's racist in some way.
It's racist, right? So maybe we should so is the identity Jewish the same like the feeling that is not me is my, right? So is the soul something that can't be, like you said, lilac, right? Obscure. Like, is the soul, can I, like all those, but if I can't say that someone, all the things that we said, excited, curious, what else did you say? Lilac, tired, sad, Jewish, sinful. You didn't say that, but no, we don't have sinful souls in this room, right? See, these are really good, because what out of all those adjectives or whatever, the adjective, that's the right word, right? Out of all these adjectives, right? An adjective describes a noun. Out of all these adjectives, are they describing our soul, or are they describing other faculties that are related to us but are not our soul? And if so, what's the relationship between that which we call the soul and all those things you have mentioned? Great question, not one answer, depending what you think. And the different layers of Judaism had different answers. Yes.
It goes back to God. Nothing impure could go back to God.
How do you know that it goes back to God?
Said so.
Oh, because Ecclesiastes said so, but that's just one opinion. Well, maybe in the process of it going back to God, the residue of the sins falls off. I don't know. I'm just a person on earth. I don't know. I have no clue. But right, but different things have been right. So when we start thinking about those things, how do we know? And a lot of the things that we think that we know, where do we know them from? Where do we learn them? Right? Are they in the Bible? They're in the Talmud? Are there a Buddhist influence? Are there Greek influence? Are they? I don't know. You see what Christian, Catholic, Muslim, where biblical, Talmudic? Where is right? A lot of and all these in the end, these are all words. And is a soul even something that we can describe in words, right? Okay, can you read another paragraph?
All right. I'm liking that. We're finding the rules of the game as we go, as we speak. Yeah.
Medieval philosophy transformed soul talk by merging Jewish sources with Greek and Islamic ideas. Philo of Alexandria reads the Torah through Plato. The soul is divine and rational, longing for intellectual ascent. Sadja Gaon rejects Platonism and describes the soul as a creative, subtle, non-material substance, immortal and destined for bodily resurrection. Maimonides, following Aristotle, redefines the soul as the sum of human faculties, where immortality belongs only to the acquired intellect. Ideas we truly understand become our eternal form. For Maimonides, this is not personal survival in a narrative sense, but an impersonal continuity of knowledge.
And read one more paragraph so we can get all the medieval philosophy in one reading.
Gershonides defends a more personal intellectual immortality. The knowledge one gains becomes the enduring self. Hostel Kreska
He's that Kreskas.
okay, shifts the focus from knowledge to love, arguing that the human soul clings to God through longing and divine grace. Yehuda Halevi emphasizes that the soul's truest expression is prophetic, arising from relationship with God more than from philosophical reasoning. In all these thinkers, the soul is no longer just life force. It becomes intellect, will, yearning, and moral consciousness.
All right. This is like 2 paragraphs trying to put together like a Judaism 101 philosophy, introduction to Jewish philosophy in 2 paragraphs about the soul. Okay, so it's a lot, and you don't have to remember all the details. There's no quiz about which philosopher said what. Right, but what do you make of this? What do you make? What's different? Like that, even when we start reading about those things, the whole conversation changes. Right, the color of the conversation changes. Why? What's been added once we go to the Middle Ages and we start to talk about these medieval Jewish philosophers? What's new? What's added that wasn't there before? Yes, that there's a philosophical discussion about this. All of a sudden, there's a person who sits and thinks and writes long books or treaties or tractates or essays about one question in a systematic way and tries to defend a certain thesis. The soul is this and that. There is something that remains after death. It's called the soul. It is the intellect. Someone else would argue, no, after we die, nothing is left. Nothing is nothing. Writes a whole book about that. Someone else would argue and say, oh, it's actually it's not the intellect, it's love, or it's the human will. Nuances, debates. Where did all this come from? That's new, and that is, like I said before, that is Hellenistic Greek influence, and sometimes the Greek philosophers, depending on the time and place in history, in your timeline there that you got, right? So some of the Greek influence is direct from Greeks, like Philo of Alexandria, who lived amongst all the other Hellenistic people in Alexandria, and was part of the Hellenistic discourse. Or if you have later Jewish philosophers, they're already living in the early Islam world, and they get Greek philosophy that the Arabs were learning from the Greeks, learning it from the Arabs, and having a Jewish kind of like dialogue with that. Okay? Just like in later years, people in the Christian Western culture who are Jewish have a discourse with that culture. Right? But this entire idea of philosophy. I'm a philosopher. I will sit and I will be influenced maybe by Plato or Aristotle or some version of that. And I will take a Jewish text and I will try to integrate it and have a systematic essay that says this and that about the soul or another, or God or whatever. That's a new thing. Is this how we think? When we tend to think about those issues, is that how we think? Yes, no? Did that lose you? Usually when we start to talk about philosophy, it's like, oh my God, philosophy. Let's go back to biblical discourse. Where's Kabbalah already? Give me some Kabbalah. But you can't skip that. Because a lot of the constructs that we have in our culture are influenced by this Western philosophy culture, the roots of which are the Greek and Roman, and then Islam, and then Christianity, who took those ideas. Right? This idea that we need to have an organized idea of what is the soul. That we need to debate it, that we need to know how it is, and we need to think about it and defend that thesis. That's a Greek idea. Okay? Perhaps the most important Jewish philosopher is Maimonides. His big project, well, he had two big projects. One project of his was to write a book for the masses. And he invented the idea that these are the 613 commandments that all the Jews should follow. He invented that. There's a saying in rabbinic literature, there's 613 mitzvot, but the rabbis never bothered to write the list. There's a reason why it was not a closed list. Maimonides is like, we should have a systemized idea of what is Judaism. He was influenced by philosophy, by Greek thought. He got it through the Arabs. He was part of the Muslim world in Spain. And then he moved to Morocco and Cairo and different places. But he got this idea, let's organize the religion. This is Judaism. This was for the masses. Then for the elite philosophers such as himself, he wrote a completely other book called, anyone knows? Guide to the Perplexed, right? Where he wrote completely different things. Basically saying that knowing God is knowing your mind. Okay, knowing God is knowing your mind. If you die, what is left according to Maimonides? The real Maimonides, not what he's writing to the masses. You know? What? No. Nothing. According to Maimonides, actually there's no life after death. Other than maybe a very abstract kind of like wisdom that you get, but it's not you. Okay, so really, and he will never say it outright because he didn't want to sound heretical. But according to Maimonides, really, there's no life after death in any way. It's just the intellect that knows God through knowing what God is not. Very, very kind of, beautiful philosophy, but not like everything we're going to learn about Kabbalah later on is not Maimonides. It's like anti-Maimonides almost. All right. So this is the third step. If we have biblical Judaism, rabbinic Judaism, philosophical Judaism of the Middle Ages or medieval times. Maybe some nuance worth mentioning in what you've read is Chisdai Kreskas's criticism of Maimonides and all the others who were obsessed or thinking about the intellect. That the soul or that the divine in human beings has to do with what we know. Kreska says, why are you saying that it's what we know? Why is what we know more divine than what we feel? No, he said that the divine within us is about love and about will, not knowledge, not intellect. But who was right? The ones who said it's intellect. Okay, but this is like Jewish philosophy. Any questions so far? Yeah.
I have a question about the soul possibly being collective or communal,
Mhm.
and that would be one way of looking at the Bible as possibly a collective soul, or
Mhm.
Shabbat,
Yeah,
a collective soul of the people that would be transcendent and eternal and holy.
yeah. That's a great question. Which when we're in our is it like Rabbi Zohar's soul, Sandy Mitzner's soul, right? Josh Faber's soul? Is it an individual soul, or when we see soul, that we connect to something that is more communal or universal? When Maimonides is talking about the intellect as being God, that's how I perceive it. Is more he feel that there's this kind of like divine intellect that you can tap into, like you tap into a server. So nowadays, by the way, we can really feel it. It's like the internet, right? Not to mention artificial intelligence, or right. In other words, we can tap into a universal source of intellect, of truth. But is it me? Is it me, Rabbi Zohar, who become this intellect, or am I just paying a subscription to Netflix? You know what I mean? Is it the fact that it shows on my screen at home, does it mean that it's mine? The fact that I know that 2 + 2 is 4. Is it me who's reached that intellectual climax, or is it just a universal truth that 2 and 2 is 4, and I happen to know it? And after I die and I don't have a body anymore, is there still a Rabbi Zohar who knows it's a 2 and 2 and 4? Or gets any merit for that? Or if I think that 2 and 2 is 3, do I go to hell? We see it's a really good question. How much of this soul that we're talking about here is something that is right, and how much of it is collective, or is it just for all people, or for the whole world, or is it and basically after I die, is there something that remains of me that is just me, or I just become part of something cosmic? But you could have a vote about that. Take a survey. Yeah, we're just asking questions. We're not coming up with any answers. Yeah.
Sounds like what is a soul is a multiple choice question with no wrong answers.
Yeah.
Which is not particularly comfortable.
Yeah. Well, so you know how it is. It's not like, how many of us would want to say that the soul is a terrible and evil thing? How many of us would want to see what I mean? In other words, what I'm saying, it's a very wide river. Maybe it has some banks. Maybe there is a direction, right? Maybe from all these questions. Right now, I'm still trying to open us to ideas and really kind of shake our world a little bit. And yes, in a very Jewish way, Judaism, especially Reformism, will not give you a dogma, right? And even though later on in this course we're going to focus on the Kabbalistic approach, or even just Kabbalistic approach, Kabbalistic approaches, you can learn for years, not 6 weeks, about the Zohar versus Luriani Kabbalah versus early Kabbalah versus later Hasidic interpretations of Kabbalah, etc., etc., etc. But that will be only a drop in the sea of all this. Okay, and it's important for me to give you that perspective before we delve into something which is a little more, this is how the soul is, and even then you'll see that it's not exactly dogmatic. It's more, it's different. I think you'll see that these are also texts that are meant to make us feel and experience and think, rather than tell you this is how it is. Okay. Yeah, and it's great, because the path to get to the promised land, you have to walk in the desert for 40 years, right? And in the process of learning, there's also a lot of unlearning that we have to do, and thank God that our Jewish soul, but actually I would say a human soul, is such that we have a critical faculty, and we're supposed to use it, right? And it's good to also deconstruct a little bit our preconception of I have a soul, it's good, it's pure, it comes from God, it goes back to God. Every day we get a chance. I'm not saying that's what you're saying. It's a lot of those things that I believe myself, or that I've been taught that myself, but it's not a bad idea to kind of like say, really, but Is that so? And how do we know it? And where in Judaism exactly, like where did it begin? If we start to think about the soul in this way. It helps to know the history of the different layers and the influences and the different school of thought and the disagreements. There is a great debate between the Kabbalists and the philosophers in the late medieval times because, for example, because if Maimonides said knowing God is through the intellect, there is no soul of an individual that remains after death. A lot of the philosophers are saying, excuse me? What do you mean? That's like the basis of our religion. And the Kabbalists are saying, excuse me, I don't agree with that. There is a soul. It does live without. So there's more than one way to look about it. And even when we'll be studying something particular, I want you to know that it's just an opinion within Judaism. Right? Yeah.
Belief and what you believe it is. Soul is what you believe it is. And maybe very sensitive if there's this quality or whatever afterwards. But there's nothing to back it up. There's nothing that we could faith.
Right. So look, today we have neuroscience. We have research about the brain. We know a lot more about our physical and we know a lot more than the ancients did, and I think, however, we also know exactly the same about whatever it is that science can prove, right? What we do have, though, is a tradition of thousands of years of people who have thought about it before us, and this is important, right? Because we don't have to invent each and every one of us doesn't have to reinvent the wheel every time we're born. And we start to wonder about that thing. What is the soul? Right? We have thousands of years of, well, by the way, not just Jewish. We happen to be in a Jewish synagogue. I'm teaching Judaism, but I'm also admitting without that Jewish tradition has been in conversation with lots of other cultures. We have thousands of years of Jewish and human history, right? That can help us be more self-conscious of our own ideas and how they were shaped. And also, we don't have to ask those questions from scratch every time because others have thought about them before us. Having said that, it doesn't mean that we have to accept what they said. Sometimes maybe what they say is a dogma that we want to deconstruct. That's also okay. But in the end, I agree with you. These are, in the end, at the core of those things, it's an experience, it's a belief. It's not necessarily knowledge in the Greek scientific way. Okay, right, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, if the soul is what's left after the body dies, could it be our ideas, our legacy, our children?
I don't know. What do you guys think? Maybe. Right? So, yeah.
I keep thinking of this movie that I saw. It was a guy on death row, and he had murdered, just unbelievably horrendous thing. And a nun came all the time to visit him, and she was trying very hard to get him to be in touch with his soul, so that when he did die, he went, to the electric chair. He would go to God in a pure state, even though his rest of his life he had done horrible things.
Mm-hmm. So that's really interesting, and see how many preconceived notion there are about this.
There was a side. She believed there was a side of him that was pure.
Yeah, right. So, and that also that pure that there is a part of him that is pure, that is uncontaminated by his terrible deeds. That after he dies, that pure part needs to get to heaven, and that by him having some kind of a process in his last weeks or days or month, that is dependent upon that. Right? There's all these ideas that are ideas to the very little that I understand Catholicism is very much part of that tradition, but is it really so? Maybe that part will go to heaven regardless if he's a murderer. Maybe there's no heaven. maybe, you see what I mean? There's so many options. And again, I think what you're giving is a wonderful example because there is a movie, which is part of our culture, right? It's heavily embedded in the Catholic tradition, in the Western society where Christianity is the mainstream faith, like it or not, whatever, right? For better and for worse. And a lot of our popular culture and a lot of the ways that we think about those things, whether directly or indirectly, have to do with these Catholic notions that for generations we've been reading books, seeing movies, etc., about these things. They're not all some of them might align with some Jewish concepts. Some few, not all.
It sounded like part did line.
Yes, because Judaism is a very close sister of Catholicism, right? Or Judaisms, because there's more than one Jewish, right? But this is something that we have. All I'm saying, and I'm also not saying that Catholicism is bad. Or I think as someone I recently started visiting the Monroe County Jail every week, and I meet inmates there weekly, and I'm only beginning to understand how to work with them, so I wouldn't claim to be an expert. And I'm happy for the opportunity to work with these individuals, right? But I wouldn't say that I have a dogma to teach them like that. None. And maybe also that none. Maybe all she wanted was to really be there for that person, right? And then those discussions about after death are giving hope or giving, right? Maybe it's not so much about what happens after. Maybe it's a way for that person to reconcile with their messed up life and whatever they did and kind of die in a more peaceful way. Mm-hmm. Yes. And I'm saying that nun is probably a very good person and she's there because she's very compassionate. I'm not undermining, but I mean deconstructing or trying to deconstruct the movie that I haven't seen. Okay. I'm not trying to say that it's a good or bad movie or that nuns are bad or good. All I'm saying is that the ideas behind the story, if we look at it like, is it really so? Why is it so? Does it matter? Yeah.
It's part of the reason why it's so hard to answer what is the soul, because in some, this may be going off, in circles or tangents or there's no set answer to why is the soul either. It feels like the soul has a purpose, but if we can't decide on what the purpose is,
yeah,
it's very hard to define what it is.
Right. So great. So usually, and it's amazing. Usually, when we think, and you're a scientist, right? You're a mathematician. Usually when we think about anything else, if we're not shallow people, we want to understand its essence. We want to understand why it's there, right? If we all know why we're doing what we're doing, we can all figure out how to get there. Right? And if you have no clue about what is it we're doing, we'll all go in circles and everyone will argue and right? And so great, right? Does the soul have a purpose? In fact, the text that I'm going to teach, God, inshallah, God willing, next week is going to be a text from the Zohar that asks, who needs a soul? What's the purpose of the soul? You're kind of like leading me to where I want to go. And so yes, so it's a great question. Assuming that there is a soul, I'll get to you in a second. Maybe, we'll see. That's the plan, at least. Assuming that there is a soul, right? Does it have a purpose? If it has a purpose, how can we achieve that purpose? Right? So Kabbalah will say that it does have a purpose. We'll get there. But before we get there, I don't want to bring dogma upon you before I deconstruct. Because when I bring the dogma or the suggestion, the soft dogma, I want us to remain also that, you can believe it, you can question it, you can understand it, right? Yeah.
Good segue to my question. Is it possible to be soulless? Because I use that term a lot lately about people.
Yeah.
And about being soulless.
Yeah.
So is it possible?
I'm looking at my shoes for a second. It's possible to be soulless. I don't know. I have diamonds at the soles of my shoes. I think I'll sell them later. So great question. You see, so yeah, so I don't know. I sold my soul to the devil, so I'm soulless. Great question. And why would we want to say that about another human being?
Because they're evil.
Well,
Or they act in evil ways.
well, like the song, you got to change your evil way, baby. For I say that you're soulless. And if I say it, does it make me feel better? You got to be technical. Yeah, so should I say about someone that they are soulless? And what if they say that about me? I mean, you see what, and so we said it. So see what I mean? And if we agree that even murderers in jail have a soul, why would we want to say about anyone in the world that they're soulless? Let me, for the sake of the argument, and I have no clue what you're talking about. For the sake of the argument, let's say that someone is evil. Let's say, are they soulless? Right? And who are we to say and who are we to judge? Are we God? You see, I personally, I would be cautious to say that anyone is soulless. It could be someone that I argue with. It could be someone that I feel anxious about. It could be someone that angers me, frustrates me, someone who's doing bad things. Maybe I would say a lot of things about a lot of people. I try not to, but maybe I will in my heart. But I don't know. Would I want to say that anyone is soulless? I'm not sure. Okay, and then how does it serve us? I mean, really, I'm answering you in the Jewish way, answering a question with a question. I mean, can someone be as evil as? Again, let's get above the particular example, okay? Because throughout history, a lot of people have aggravated a lot of people, but let's bring it to us. Would we say that would we someone as so evil that they don't have a soul anymore?
Well, that nun was saying just the opposite. Still somewhere there. Soul.
Because if I say my soul is pure, nothing can contaminate. A lot of you are vowing to that. They're saying you're all rallying like half an hour ago. No, the soul is pure; it can never be contaminated. And no matter what you do, except for that guy. Right, that guy. So maybe I don't know. Maybe there's a criteria. Maybe it's like if you didn't pull. Like once I lived in a car. It had a little house on it. It was 2000 and something. The car was from 1977. The same year that I was born. It was a tiny little Ford truck with a little car, a house on top of it. And I had a partner back then. We were living in the car, going around America like this. And we just didn't know that you're supposed to put oil and water in the car because we were young and stupid. Like they told us, but we forgot. So every time, for example, when we were in Death Valley, it kept like the engine kept like and then we just pour water on the engine from the outside. And in the end, one day in Tennessee, the car died, and then I went back to Israel. That was it. But and then the second Intifada started. Like, why the hell did I go back to Israel? But that's a whole other story. And so basically, like a week after I came back, Intifada, second Intifada. But that's a whole other story. Why I'm saying you this story is that maybe is the soul is a bad soul like a car, like it'll keep going and going, but after a certain point, not enough oil and water, good deeds, honesty, integrity will just explode in you. That's it. No soul. Or is the soul really pure? And even the person that upsets you has a soul, but maybe his or her or their way in the world is corrupt or you strongly disagree with. And are you willing to say that someone doesn't have a soul because what you're risking is that they'll say the same thing about you? So give and take. We can negotiate. Right, so it's a great question. It really is a great question. And again, I'm not thinking about personal, about something we're not here to. This is a different class. political pinpointing. This is not our class, right? It's really to take your questions. If someone really upsets me, does that person not have a soul? Great question. Would we want to go as far as that? And do we even understand what the soul is? That we can say this person has a soul, is soulless. It's a very big insult to say someone, you are soulless, right? Because understanding that the soul is that pure thing. Oh, this person so corrupt, so rotten that they don't even have a soul. I don't know. It's not necessarily a language that I would use, but again, I'm just a person that exists in the world. I don't make the rules. Yeah.
Maybe God didn't visit them.
Maybe a lot of people said that about Jews throughout history. That God doesn't visit them, and they're going to say it. I go sometimes to places here, and oh, you're Jewish. No, you have to accept Jesus. Otherwise, you're going to rot in hell. Blah 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 blah. So I'm very careful about attributing those kind of stark judgments about anyone, and no matter how much I disagree with them politically, or that they upset me, or that I think that they're terrible people. I'm very careful about going as far as to say that they are soulless. I'm not sure what that serves. But again, I don't make one thing about Reformed Judaism is that nobody listens to the rabbi. Yeah, I'll say what I think, and everybody will do what they want. Yeah, Quinn.
I think something makes me think about is people who go through either addiction recovery with alcoholism or other things. Something that's really popular with people in their first years to do things like yoga or breath work or things like that. And I think that whether someone can be soulless or have they depleted their soul or superseded their soul, because if you lose complete touch with it, it might seem like someone is soulless. I think the soul is still there. I think people just can erase it or eradicate the relationship with it. But I think it can always come back.
Thank you for that. I think that you're, by the way, we're out of time. And your homework is going to be to take this home and read this. I'm not going to spend although it's kind of cool to go throughout what I'm going to address your sentence. Before that, I'm going to say your comment. Please take this home and read it and read all the other things. And then if you have any questions about that, you can ask me. But what I'd like to do, and it's kind of great because he kind of like got to Kabbalah, right? Like we didn't get through the Kabbalah and the post-Kabbalah, which is here. Read it through and it'll give you a systematic idea, because also when we study Kabbalah, there's how we got to Kabbalah, which is what we covered in this class. But there's also, since Kabbalah, what happened. When I read a Kabbalistic text that was written 1,000 years ago, 700 years ago, I don't read it innocently. I read it with 1,000 years of history that came between me and that text. Right? So read that. If you have a question about it next week, do you want to keep reading that, or do you want to go straight into the Zoharic text? What do you want to do? We'll see, right? But depending on how many questions you have. So because we need to finish on be respectful of our time, I will say that. And again, I knew that we weren't going to get through this, and it's fine. Take it home, read it, read the timeline, read the text. Tell me if you have any questions. Look up the different thinkers. If there's a line here about each thinker, and it intrigues you, Google them. Who are they? What else did they say? Okay. Order the book on Amazon. Read it on Kindle. Whatever. This is a gateway to lots of things, right? So thank you, Quinn, for bringing up that thing about recovery, and and I like what you're saying, because it's a little bit more positive in the way that maybe I can say my soul is depleted, or I have lost connection to my soul, right? Or I like the song, I don't know where my soul is. I don't know where my soul. That's not right. What's the real words? I don't even know. I don't know where my phone is. I don't know where my phone is. That's something else. What is it, the real words? And at any rate, right? So maybe the question is not to cast judgment upon one's soul, but how do you reconnect to that soul? Maybe what I always like to do, I prefer when we study Torah not to, in Hebrew we say that not to draw our attention to someone far away, so we escape from ourselves. Right? I'd like to bring it to us in this room. Have we ever felt soulless? Or have we ever felt that we're depleted? or that we lost touch or connection with our soul, or that we'd like to find a way to reconnect to it. Right? I think that, to me, that's a little more constructive. A, because it's not talking about someone else who's not in the room. Right? And B, because it gives us kind of a positive, something to aspire for. And maybe also then my hope and my intent about this class, that it will not remain in the theoretical academical level. I think that this kind of an introduction is important, because then our discussion is not like floating in midair without context. There is thousands of years of Jewish history and thought that have, right? I want us to understand more or less. And when we're talking about Kabbalistic texts, they're from the 13th century, the 16th century. They're in the context of this and that debate. You can backtrace it, you can negate it, you can, right? But in the end, this is not, a university. This is a congregation. My attempt in this class, in this series of classes, is to have us meet texts that can answer questions such as, what is the purpose of the soul? For example, like the next text is really about that. You kind of, I think you're very connected in your soul, and the battery here is over. Yeah. Okay. So, and this is also a hint for us. We need to go home, but just to say that this is my idea for the next 5 sessions that we have and beyond, is that we are able to use this world to awaken something about ourselves, to ask the question that hopefully, even though we didn't really study any text today, maybe already we come out a little bit invigorated and thinking, what is my soul? When was the last time that I was connected or disconnected to it? Or what does it mean? Or what's its purpose? And how am I to go about it? Very short, because we got to go. Yeah.
I think it would be interesting to hear Jewish point of view on reincarnation and soul perfecting over different generations.
You guys are just laying out the syllabus, because we are going to talk about the soul's purpose and where it's coming from and where it's going, and reincarnation, which does exist in Kabbalah, although other Jews did not believe in that. All those things. What are the different parts of the soul? What are we talking about when we mean the soul? All those things are, this is our syllabus for the next sessions. And again, not that it's right or wrong necessarily, but it's just that this is how some people have described it. And then we'll be able to see if that is something that's helpful to us in the way that we live. Hopefully, again, our approach here is personal and transformative. We're not just learning for the sake of expanding our knowledge, but it's fine. If you're here just because you want to expand this is not a cult. You know what I mean? You don't have to agree with what I say. You don't have to undergo deep, processes with your own self to be here. You can just be here for the entertainment. That's fine. That's enough, However, to me, the texts that I'm going to bring to you have been transformative and have helped me not just conceptual, but also experience and think about my world and my relationship with myself, others. So hopefully that will be something that you'll be able to do as well, but it's really up to you. Okay? All right, so we've covered a lot of ground. Take this home, read it if you want until the end. We'll see you next week, okay? Bring a friend. Thank you for being here. Register at the website. Here, that's the text we're going to be studying next week. I was trying to record it.
I mean, for next week.
We could try to record it.
Oh, that would be great.
We should. But I do all these things are recorded, and we're not.
And how do you get it?
I mean, oh, you go to our website. There's a control.
Okay.
ROSH-ESTHER.
And this was a
Oh, okay. Well, there's a field in here. There's this. There's the whole package. This one and this, and then she'll be all set. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, where did you go?
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah.
When is it? December? We'll have enough time to go. It's not for like a
I saw something say about that.
Done with this.